Hey guys, welcome back to Hook with Anime. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Sacrifice. Sasuke. Naruto screamed out, as he rushed through the portal after his friend. The raven-haired boy sneered, as he began to form hand signs. But Naruto beat him to it. He smashed his fist into the boy's cheek, sending him flying forward. Tumbling through the portal, Naruto hot on his heels. "Don't run away from this," Naruto shouted out, gripping onto Sasuke's tattered jacket, as the portal engulfed them both, taking them into the oblivion. "Once I kill you here, once I sever the last bond, I'll return to our world and start anew. If anyone tries to stop me, I'll put them to the ground." Kage, Kakashi, or even Sakura, he cursed back, backhanding Naruto, pushing him away, as the other end of the portal appeared below them. The blonde quickly recovered and propelled himself forward to his friend. "Don't give me that crap. I'm not going to let you do that. You're coming home with me. We'll end this," he snarled, smashing into Sasuke just as the two came out the other end. They were both met with a bright lush blue sky, but neither of them paid that any mind. They didn't know where they were and neither of them cared. All of their focus was on each other. Sasuke quickly retaliated against Naruto with a swift uppercut. "Yes. Let's end this once and for all." He grinned, kicking the blonde towards the ground below at an insane speed. Naruto clenched his teeth, as he neared the surface of the world. A lush forest was all he could see below him. The blonde braced for impact just as he collided with treetops. Smashing down towards the ground, everything around him was instantly ripped to shreds as he skidded on top of the earth. Damn it," he cursed out, quickly slowing himself down before his brother could catch up to him. But even still the Uzumaki could sense Sasuke's chakra closing in. He swiftly spun around. A Rasengan instantly appeared in his right hand. With a firm resolve, Naruto smashed his ball of chakra against Sasuke's incoming Amaterasu blade. His Rasengan grinded against the black blade while he began to snarl out. "Why won't you just listen? Just listen to me for once. I don't want to kill you, Sasuke. The time for talking is over, Naruto. Let our actions speak," the Uchiha shouted, his Amaterasu blade disappearing. Naruto's eyes widened. That could only mean one thing. The Uchiha soon disappeared before him, only to instantly appear behind him. A purple energy surrounded his body, as he laid an unholy kick onto Naruto's back. A sickening crack soon followed as the blonde was forced forward a massive distance and at lightning speeds. "Ah!" Naruto coughed out, as he tumbled across the ground, at an unimaginable speed, cutting up the earth below him, shredding all the trees as he crashed through them, with no sign of stopping. Then after another second of this he soon exited the forests and collided into a nearby mountainside. All under 5 seconds. Naruto clenched his teeth in pain from the violent impact, blood running down his forehead and from his mouth. Down below in the forest, Sasuke narrowed his eyes as his entire body became bathed in purple energy. "Susanoo!" he uttered as his giant avatar of chakra formed around him, rising him high into the air, soon dwarfing all the trees around him. After a few seconds the giant purple humanoid formed a long purple bow, followed by a large blue lightning arrow. It took aim at the mountainside as the lightning around it began to gather, the very ground shaking beneath it. Sasuke was preparing to end this all in one go. "Indora no Ya." Just as the words uttered from Sasuke's mouth, his Susanoo released the mighty arrow from the bow, sending it racing towards Naruto, the ground beneath it disintegrating as it passed above. Back on the mountainside, Naruto had barely any time to recover by the time his eyes laid upon the arrow. But as they did, a powerful essence of yellow and orange chakra took shape around his body. Flowing and forming around him, Naruto closed his eyes just as the arrow impacting next to him. A bright flash soon followed, as Sasuke had to look away for a moment, but soon after averted his eyes back only to be amazed at his raw power. In a matter of seconds a large mushroom cloud appeared in place of the top half of the mountain. Nothing but molten rock and rubble below it. Nothing could have survived that. Nothing. Not even his stupid friend. He had to be dead. He just had to be. Are you happy now, Naruto? Look at what you made me do. He shouted, narrowing his eyes, as they slowly began to bleed. A maniacal expression soon filling his face, as he fell to his knees inside his Susanoo. You were a good-for-nothing loser. But you were still my friend. My brother. He suddenly screamed, as he smashed his fist into his Susanoo. You made me do this. It was all your fault. But I had to. The Uchiha cried out, not noticing the ground move beneath him. After a few more seconds of his emotional episode, Sasuke stood back up with a smirk. I'm finally rid of you. My last bond. My last brother, he uttered, his face returning to its neutral state, before he continued to speak aloud. Now all that's left is the other-tailed beast and the Hokage. He spoke, beginning to focus chakra into his Rinnegan, wanting to create a portal home, away from wherever this place was. No, you don't, a voice screamed out, just as Naruto came crashing from underneath. A bright yellow chakra fist, uppercutting Sasuke's Susanoo into the air. Sasuke gasped, just as the blonde followed after him, laying into the purple humanoid. Punch after punch with his chakra fists further into the sky. Naruto clenched his teeth, beginning to form a tailed beast ball in his hands. Determined not to let Sasuke get an opening on him, I'm ending this now. He added, getting right up to the Susanoo's forehead and pressing the tailed beast's ball into it. Sasuke's eyes widened, as the ball quickly grinded into the purple chakra. He looked at Naruto, then back to the ball, just as the Susanoo began to crack around it. Sasuke was taken back for a second, but swiftly found a solution to the problem. He instantly dispelled his Susanoo before forming a black Amaterasu blade and slashing against the tailed beast ball, thus flinging both of the jutsus away from their users, leaving them both open. This time I'm going to make sure you're dead. Sasuke screamed, a blade of lightning soon forming in hand. Naruto didn't speak, he simply acted, taking Sasuke's words to heart. He formed two Rasengans and pushed them towards his foe, just as his opponent's Chidori finished charging up. Sasuke in turn lunged towards his friend, ready to end it all. Both forces of chakra neared each other, and soon slammed into themselves. Both shinobi clenched their teeth in the air, time seemingly stopping for them, as the air filled with energy. You're not going to win, you idiot. Naruto screamed, pushing his Rasengan downward with full force. With the aid of gravity, Sasuke was sent hurtling towards the ground, as Naruto shouted in rage. Just stop, please. And never. The raven-haired boy screamed in return as they both neared the surface of the earth. Not even a moment later, they both impacted into a large field. A massive shock wave shook the surrounding area, as Naruto continued to drive his Rasengans into his Chidori. Both seemingly unfazed by the fall. Sasuke grunted, as Naruto shoved one of his Rasengans into his chin, flinging him forward across the field, and into a rocky cliffside. Naruto panted, trying to catch his breath, standing back up on his own 2 feet, before suddenly clutching his side. Tch. He grunted, knowing full well he had broken more than a few ribs from that fall. This has to end, and fast or I won't last much longer, he thought to himself, looking back to the rocky cliff side. Just in time to catch the sparkling beginnings of another mighty Indra arrow. Naruto. It's time to finish this. He heard Sasuke scream from the other end of the field. Both of them knew this was one of their final moments. Nothing more could stop this. Nothing could prevent this. No words, no actions. This was the end. Naruto clenched his teeth in frustration, just as he felt a familiar presence flood his mind. You're the only one that's left, kid, end this. Kurama growled. The blonde mentally nodded to his tailed beast and began to slow his breath. He narrowed his eyes and focused a large amount of chakra into his palms. Time began to slow as something large formed in his hands. He looked towards Sasuke, blood dripping down both his hands, as he began to growl, Rakuto. Kirin, Sasuke shouted, appearing behind Naruto in an instant. A large pillar of lightning dropping from the sky as he did, and Naruto. He added, stuttering as his lighting dragon dropped from the sky and grabbed a hold of Naruto. The entire area was set ablaze, as the grass was charred away, AGHNNHHGGG. Naruto screamed out, as he surprisingly gripped the jaws of the dragon. Sasuke's eyes widen in shock at his friend's actions. I'm not done yet, he snarled, looking over at him. The raven-haired boy's eyes widen in anger. Non. Just die already, he screamed, lightning forming into an oversized bolt of energy in his hands. Naruto visibly jumped at this as Sasuke narrowed his already bloodshot eyes at his friend. Preparing to launch his energy bolt. Naruto. Naruto clenched his teeth as Kurama's familiar orange flames surrounded his hands, as he quickly formed his most powerful jutsu yet, above his palms. A beautiful swirling mass of energy formed like a star above him. Within nanoseconds it was fully formed, as a hurricane force wind shuriken surrounded. Naruto looked up at Sasuke, who stared in angry and hate. He clenched his fist in response before whispering aloud, "I'm sorry." Just before unleashing his attack towards the Uchiha. Indora no Ya, Rakudo Odama Rasen's Hurricane. Each of the brothers' words echoed aloud, just as the attacks struck each other. Time seemed to freeze for a moment, as all was quiet. Both forces of chakra grinding against each other, until finally a spark occurred between them, and all hell broke loose. The sheer force that the attacks unleashed made the Ten Tails attacks seem like firecrackers. The very rock beneath them simply ceased to exist. Everything, even the very air and sky, blew away, as everything within a 10-mile radius was blown away by the sheer force of their attacks. A beautiful array of yellows and reds soon appeared as a massive mushroom cloud rose into the sky. This was the most powerful attack that this world had seen, and yet it was just the beginning. Beneath it all, at ground zero, just about everything was molten rock and fire. Except two solid pieces of ground, where two individuals still stood. Naruto and Sasuke. Give it up, Sasuke. TS destruction. It's enough. The Uzumaki stuttered out, gripping his chest. His clothes seared and torn from the blast. But Sasuke wasn't having any of it. He simply discarded his destroyed gray jacket and lunged at Naruto. Running across the molten rock, on him. He yelled, using a part of his last remaining chakra reserves to form one last Chidori. Naruto clenched his fist in frustration and ran towards him. Creating two clones behind him. Why won't you listen to me? Just listen, he pleaded, as Sasuke created two clones of his own. Just shut up. End this. End this. Sasuke screamed, as the trios collided with each other. The first pair of clones instantly dispelled as the Naruto tackled the Uchiha into the molten rock, while the second pair clashed their kunais above the originals. Sasuke, stop. Please don't make me. Naruto pleaded as he swung Sasuke's arm back, keeping the Chidori away from them. But Sasuke kept pushing and pushing against him. His lighting blade getting closer and closer to Naruto's heart. The Uzumaki looked into Sasuke's eyes, expecting to see some form of remorse or compassion. But all he saw was pure rage as the blade just about reached his heart. End this. Sasuke roared out, pushing his blade forward, inches away from contact on Naruto's skin. NNHHNNN. Do it. Naruto shouted out, as Sasuke grinned in satisfaction, just as a blue spiraling orb pierced through the Uchiha's chest from behind, destroying his heart on contact and splattering Naruto with his blood, leaving them both stunned. Naruto's clone looked over from Sasuke's back, nearly in tears. I'm sorry, he said, before disappearing into a puff of smoke, leaving Sasuke to fall into the blonde's arms. Unceremoniously, Naruto clenched onto him, keeping him from falling into the molten rock. Sasuke. Idiot, he coughed, before grasping Naruto's right hand tightly. I let you win that. With a small smirk, before roughly coughing, blood splattering against Naruto, as Sasuke quickly performed the hand sign to undo the infinite Tsukuyomi back in their world. After a second he lost his grip on his hand and then smirked faintly. as a portal opening up behind the two. And now head home. There's no use saving me. But thank you. You won, Naruto. Good job, brother. He panted out, just as the life in his eyes left for good. Never to be seen again. Naruto held him in shock, his mind fully not registering what had happened. Sasuke. Sasuke, hey, come on now, he said, shaking his body. Sasuke. Sasuke. He screamed out, just as the molten rock beneath him began to shift. Quickly thinking of every option he could use, Naruto looked towards the portal. His eyes widened. Sakura. He shouted out, beginning to run over to the opening. But just as he was about to reach it, the very ground beneath him began to collapse in. Damn it. He cursed out, his chakra almost running completely dry. At least you can get out of here. Maybe she can save you, Naruto added, quickly tossing Sasuke's body through the shrinking portal. Just as the molten rock and earth swallowed him. N9. No. Sasuke. Sakura. Hinata. Everyone. I'm sorry. He yelped out, his hand disappearing under the rock. And thus beginning a journey that would shape not only his world, but another's as well. A place once connected to his. Now displaced by dark forces. A place that hid something even more dangerous than Kaguya or Madara. A true ancient evil that was about to be awakened. Chapter 2. Revelation. And no. Don't touch her. Naruto suddenly jolted out, immediately sitting up in a simple bed. Throwing the covers forward as he panted loudly. Huh? He asked a second later, catching his breath and looking around. He was in a small room, with what looked to be wood walls, a closed door at the other end of the room. Where am I? Kurama, he asked, looking down at his stomach. Hey kid, you alive? The voice of his tailed beast echoed through his mindscape. Why yeah, what happened? Where am I? He asked, the connection to his tailed beast fading in and out in his head. Kurama seemed almost like a staticky voice or TV, as he began to speak. Why you been out for so long? I'm surprised you're alive. Listen, my connection still needs some time to readjust. But it's been over. And just like that, the fox's deep voice faded away into nothingness. Kurama. Hey, you there? He asked, beginning to panic as he felt the tailed beast's energy return to the seal. This wasn't normal at all. He was about to head into the mindscape himself, but the sudden sound of a creaking floorboard caught his attention. Naruto darted his head to the door at the other end of the room, only to see the head of a small old man poke inside. Finally awake, young man? He asked, a humble smile soon filling his face. Yeah, Naruto asked, partially stunned, as the older man began to walk to his bedside. It was at this point that all his physical features became apparent to Naruto. He walked with a severe limp, and with the aid of a worn-down cane he was able to keep his balance. What am I doing here, old man? Did you save me? The blonde asked, raising an eyebrow. The man chuckled, as he scratched his balding gray hair. I'm afraid I did, boy. Not the person you were expecting? He asked, looking up at Naruto. The man's pale blue eyes covered by a simple pair of glasses. Naruto shook his head. Well, no. I wasn't expecting anyone, honestly. How'd you find me? What is this place? I found you up at the cooled lava crater. About 20 miles north of here. He revealed, placing a glass bottle filled with unique-looking pills onto the table next to Naruto. As to where you are, you're in the northern tribes, my boy. Far away from the empire. Naruto's head began to spin upon hearing this. Northern tribes. Empire. Where was he exactly? Another country. That was a possibility, something he certainly couldn't rule out. He had to dig deeper first. The last thing he remembered was sinking into the molten rock after throwing Sasuke into the portal. He should be dead right now. Sasuke had have sent them to another country. He certainly wasn't capable of sending them anywhere else, especially at his power level. Or could he? The blonde just had to find out. I'll try to make sense of this. More importantly, where exactly was I when you found me? The old man seemed to chuckle again at this. It's quite interesting, my boy. I seemed to have tripped over your hand as I was walking across the hardened rock. It took a couple of hours and more than a few of my very best tools to get you out, but when I did." He trailed off laughing. "Oh, the haircut I had to give you. You would not believe." "Huh, haircut?" Naruto asked, feeling his head. His eyes widened in an instant. Something wasn't right. He needed to find a mirror immediately. Throwing the covers forward, Naruto began to jump out of bed. "Do you have a bathroom, old man?" "Why, yes. Directly to your right as soon as you leave the room," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Thank you so much," Naruto shouted, running out of the room at inhuman speeds. "Boy must need to go bad," the old man said to himself, before shrugging. But I would too if I was under there that long as well." Naruto nearly slammed the door to the bathroom shut before drawing his attention to the sink and mirror at the other end of the room. He rushed over to look at himself, trying to figure out what was wrong, only for his own eyes to widen in shock when he saw himself. I don't understand. What's going on?" he stuttered to himself. Before him in the mirror still lied his normal self, although something seemed off. His chin was more defined than it used to be, as well as the bangs on the right side of his face drooped down more over his bruised and battered headband than the other side. Did he seem older? Finally noticed. "Did ya, kid?" the sudden low voice of his tailed beast asked, his presence flooding back into Naruto's mind. Naruto's face brightened up with a smile. "Kurama. You're okay. Hey, worried about your old fox were ya?" the fox asked with a deep chuckle, as the blonde rubbed his chin. Seeing this, Kurama rolled his eyes, moving on. "Naruto. I assume you would like to know what exactly is going on." Naruto let go of his chin and mentally nodded. "Yeah, I'd like to know. And why do I look like this? How long has it been?" Kurama sighed aloud, knowing that telling Naruto this would certainly shake him up pretty good, but nevertheless, he had to do it. "It's been approximately 2 years since your fight with the Uchiha," he revealed. Naruto held his breath, as his eyes went as wide as the moon. I'm sorry, what?" he asked, an audible stutter heard in his tone. "The battle, Naruto," he began, "it was not just fought in the physical dimension, but also the spiritual dimension. The old man watched the entire thing go down. He had the final say on what to do with you after it was all said and done." "By old man? You mean?" he asked, trailing off as he continued to look at himself in the mirror. "The old sage, Hagoromo," Kurama growled, slightly annoyed that Naruto could forget about one of the most important figures for all of shinobi and tailed beasts. I don't understand," Naruto shot back, gripping the sides of the sink and looking down in confusion and frustration. With his fleeting words, he asked us to make sure you stayed in this world. Sasuke's eyes beamed in on Kagaya's nexus. Her home. This was no chance transportation. You were brought here for more than a simple fight with the Uchiha. Hagoromo sensed something when we arrived. Worse than his own mother, Kurama revealed. "How has it been 2 years though?" the blonde asked, looking up at himself in the mirror. His younger teenage self gone. "You can thank us tailed beasts on that one. Normally you would have died falling into that molten rock. But we were able to form a protective chakra barrier around you until it cooled, but once that happened you were already buried, and we were all low on chakra. So we used everything we had to keep you alive in a coma-like state for the past 2 years. You continued to age until that man found you and was able to nurse you back to health." The Nine Tails explained, with a low grumble. Naruto looked down one more time before pushing himself off the sink with a sigh. Seemingly coming to terms with their current situation. "I see, Kurama. Do you think we'll ever be able to see home again?" "Can't tell you that, kid. Hagoromo didn't tell me and none of the other tailed beasts know. Maybe one day," Kurama revealed. Naruto turned from the sink and headed back to the door. "Yeah. Maybe one day. Now let's figure out why we're needed here. I can try to sort everything out later." "Oh, maybe it isn't just your body that's age," the fox chucked, as Naruto mentally raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean? If I got here, then I can find a way back. I owe it to Itachi, Nagato, and Obito get back. I'm not going to give up here. Believe it," he cheered. Ah, never mind. Kurama groaned, rolling his eyes again. Naruto was about to make another snarky comeback just as he opened the door but quickly jumped in surprise as the voice of the old man echoed beside him. Excuse me. Young lad, are you all right? Were you talking to someone in there? No, just trying to get my bearings. Still a bit shaky from waking up, Naruto said, scratching the back of his neck as the old man began to walk towards the front room. Haha, well, I'd be too. Don't worry about it, he chuckled, turning back to Naruto. Say, why don't you take a seat at the table and I'll prepare some food. You must be starving, then you can tell me your story. Naruto nodded with a smile, his stomach sudden rumbling causing him to give off one of his cheeky smiles. Now that you mentioned it. I am. Thanks, old man. No worries, lad. Now my granddaughter should be home any minute. She'll be excited to see that you woke up. She helped me take care of you after all. He smiled, walking over to the stove. Her name's Y. Knock, knock, knock. Both of them drew their attention to the door, as the old man began to walk towards it. Oh, that must be her now. Excuse me for 1 second, he said with a soft smile, walking up and slowly opening the sturdy wooden door. Yukari, you know you can always just walk in. This is your home to you. Naruto, the door, Kurama shouted out inside the blonde's mindscape. Huh? Naruto asked, turning his head towards the just as the bright spark of light filled his eyes, followed by a massive rush of air. He covered his eyes, as all around him was engulfed in flames. After a couple more seconds, the flames died down and Naruto slowly uncovered his eyes. But what he saw before him was something he wished you could unsee. Oh, old man, Naruto asked, stuttering in shock. Before him, the entire front of the house was blown and burned to a crisp. And at the very front laid the old man, heavily burned and bruised on the ground. Naruto immediately rushed over to him, supporting his head. Hey old man. You okay? Hey, he asked, shaking him. Hang on. I can help, Naruto said, reaching his arm out towards his burns and cuts. But sadly the old man stopped him. And no, don't. Those men will kill my granddaughter if you don't stop them. I've lost too much blood. I'll be dead within minutes. He coughed out as blood started to flow out the side of his mouth. But I can. Naruto began but was quickly silenced by the man. My time has come, kid. You can't deny me this. But before I go, I do have a favor to ask of you. He coughed again, blood splattering on his seared shirt. Why, yeah, sure, anything. Naruto clenched his fist, angry with himself for not being able to detect the explosion in time. He failed this man, he had let him die. Find my granddaughter for me. Take care of Yukari, please. I'm the only family she has left. Now she'll have no one. The old man stuttered weakly. More blood began to soak the wood below them. Yeah, sure, old man, you can count on me, Naruto said with a sad smile. Thank you. Now when you find her, go to the imperial capital. It's your best bet to find some help against those beast. You got it, old man. You have my word. He clenched his teeth in pain, gripping Naruto's hand tightly. Now go. We found you for a reason. Do what you meant to do. The old man said, as his eyes began to close. Naruto slowly let go of the older man's hand and got up from the floor. He walked up to the remains of the cabin doorway that lead outside. Hearing voices advancing towards them, Naruto began to focus his chakra around him and looked back to the man. I give you my word. I'll find her and protect her with my life, he announced, his chakra flaring as he walked out of the cabin. Towards the threat. Haha, good shot, Deidara. That old fuck never saw it coming. A high-pitched voice cheered out, as Naruto walked onto the smoldering porch. Well, that's what he gets for collaborating with the rebellion in Night Raid. A much deeper voice responded as Naruto zeroed in on the culprits. A few hundred feet away stood a group darkly clad men. Search the remains. A little girl supposedly lived here too. If she's not in there, then she must be nearby. A tall man with a larger build barked. He had long, spiky blonde hair and pure white, pupil-less eyes and a devil-like headdress. If she's alive, bring her to me. I do like to have fun with them, a smaller person announced, stepping out from behind the taller man. Naruto could tell that they were a boy from where he stood. But he looked so feminine. He had blonde hair and golden eyes, a headdress similar to the tall one, and strange tail for some reason. The other men around them all began to slowly advance towards the house, but all stopped dead in their tracks when their eyes landed on Naruto. Hey, look there. Who is he? Another man asked, looking back to their leader who stood confused at the appearance of the young man. This wasn't in the briefing. Who was he? Why was he here? And most importantly, why was his aura so strong? Deidara, the small blonde boy asked, looking up to the large man. The built man known as Deidara crossed his arms and huffed out, "Hey Whiskers. Who are you?" Naruto began to walk towards them. All of the men tightened their stance, readying the rifles in their hands. "Did you blow up this house?" Naruto asked. Deidara raised an eyebrow in confusion. "What? Listen you little shit, I said who? Did you blow up this house?" Naruto shouted out, his chakra flaring out. Of course, he already knew the answer to the question. He just wanted the murderers to admit to their guilt. Deidara in the meantime was taken back for a second, but quickly brushed it aside as a sinister smile soon plastered his face. "Yeah, we did, asshole. Did the old ding-dong ditch technique on the old fucker. Blew him to kingdom come. But that's what he gets for supporting the rebellion." He snickered, just as another man came up behind him, carrying what looked like a smaller person on his shoulder. "Boss, I found her," he said, throwing the person on the ground. Naruto's eyes widened as the person's features came into view. A small little girl laid on the ground, her hands bound behind her back. She had long flowing black hair, with what looked like dog-ear-like flaps of hair on each side. She had big bright blue eyes and was wearing a small jacket with a red scarf around her neck. She couldn't have been any more than 6 or 7. This must have been Yukari, and she looked absolutely terrified. Deidara snickered again. "Excellent. Throw her here. Niao wants to get to know her a bit better." He motioned over to the smaller blonde now known as Nayua, who smiled innocently at the little girl. But at this point, Yukari had regained her senses, just as the man who had thrown her on the ground picked her up again. She quickly began to struggle. "Let me go. Let me go. Grandpa, Grandpa, help," she cried, tears beginning to slide down her cheeks. The man who was holding her chucked her over to Deidara, who caught her with ease. He quickly put her in a deadly headlock in front of Naruto and laughed. "Now if you would so kindly tell us who you were, and maybe I won't." But before the man could even finish his sentence, Naruto appeared in front of him, causing him to jump back, just as Yukari was ripped from his arms. He stumbled, trying to regain his balance. "Why, you little shit. I'll show you," he roared just as a fist found its home square in his face. Everyone heard his teeth and jaw crack as he flew back into a nearby tree, splintering it in two as he flew back into another one. This repeated a few more times before he came to a stop halfway through a large oak. All of the men around Naruto began to fire in his and Yukari's direction. "Fuck, shoot him, kill him," a few of them yelled out as Nayua stood there for a moment, horrified at the actions he had just witnessed. He took out Deidara in one hit. How is this possible? In the meantime, Naruto had used Kurama's chakra to form a shield around him and Yukari. "Damn," he sighed. "I didn't want to kill anyone, but I might have to." Naruto quickly created a clone and directed him to Yukari. "Keep her safe. No matter what, I'll get you when this is over," he told his clone, a bright orange chakra cloak forming around his arms. The clone nodded and scooped up Yukari before jumping away into the trees, leaving some of the men confused, giving Naruto the precious moments he needed. Before any of them knew it, Naruto had already dispatched 2 of them. He chucked a third into a nearby tree. "All right, 3 down. 5 more to go," he uttered, his eyes narrowing as he rushed the 4th. Taking out a kunai just as he began to open fire, Naruto dodged every bullet before digging his blade into the man's chest. If they stoop so low that they'd kill a child, then they leave me no choice. Naruto shouted out, placing an explosive tag onto the guy's back and throwing him into another, blowing them both away in an instant. At this point, the remaining 3 men had run out of ammo and brandished their long swords, charging towards the blonde with no remorse. "Die, you murdering asshole," one of them shouted, just as Naruto appeared in front of the face and landed a critical blow to his neck with his foot. The Uzumaki disappeared again, leaving the remaining 2 men, going back to back with each other, both terrified. Where the hell is he? I don't know. He panicked, looking around just Naruto appeared to both of their rights. He grappled both of their heads and knocked them into each other, smashing both of their protective helmets. The last 2 men fell to the ground unconscious, as Naruto stepped up to Naruto. "I don't know who the hell you are, but you have no idea who you're messing with. I'm Naruto, one of the 3 beasts, and I'll be." "You talk too much," Naruto's voice echoed as he appeared behind him at lightning speeds. A Rasengan fully formed and aimed at his back. The smaller blonde gasped in fear, as he tried to turn around in desperation. No. He screamed out, as Naruto plunged his spinning yellow orb straight into his back. He screamed in pain as it launched him forward, spinning in an impressive rotation until he impacted the ground with a sickening crack. Naruto sighed, looking at his handiwork. "What the hell is wrong with this world?" he asked, turning around only to narrowly dodge a bullet-like water current fly past his face and impacting into a rock beside him, boring a hole clean through it. Naruto directed his attention to the direction of the current as another man stepped forward from the tree line. He tightened the gloves around his wrists and pointed one towards the Uzumaki, narrowing his eyes in anger. "I have no idea who you are, but you severely injured my team. Mistress Death will be severely disappointed. I hope you made peace with your demons, because these are the last few breaths you'll be taking." He was a rather tall man with gray hair worn in a long ponytail, blue eyes and a mustache. He wore the same uniform like the other 2, minus the ridiculous devil horns. The 2 stared each other down, as Naruto once again focused Kurama's chakra into his arms. Not wanting to waste any more time, he rushed the man, moving faster than evil his enemy's water bullet. The gray-haired man snickered as he shot a barrage of water from his pocket directly towards Naruto. A powerful wall of liquid rushed at the blonde. The man smiled, knowing that his enemy had underestimated him like always. But he had never fought Naruto. As the wall approached him, the blonde simply rushed through the wall, the water harmlessly splashing against his body. This caused the gray-haired man to growl in anger, looking over to a nearby pond and commanding the water towards Naruto, who slid under the water effortlessly approaching him. He disappeared just before reaching the man, causing him to panic. He looked all around, beginning to command more water to him, but Naruto beat him to it. He appeared under the man and socked him right in the chin, launching him into the air with a strong uppercut. "Gone!" he groaned, as Naruto formed a Rasengan in his hand and went after him. Gripping onto his sides, Naruto slammed the man back down towards the earth with his orb. He spun out of control before impacting the ground, just as the force from the Rasengan caused a massive explosion on top of him. Naruto had barely broken a sweat as he landed back on the ground. He looked over the gray-haired man, ensuring he was down for the count. Sure enough, he was out cold, his chest slowly rising up and down. Man, he sure talked a big game for someone to go down in one attack. Even still, if this is Kagaya's homeworld, you'd think people would be more powerful here, he asked himself, a blue blur suddenly appearing behind him. "Who's Kagaya?" a voice suddenly asked as Naruto turned his head only to have a sword narrowly miss his forehead. He spun around, rocked his elbow into his new opponent's arm, who caught it with a loud grunt. Naruto raised his eyebrow, before pushing away from them and sliding to a stop, a few feet away from them. Now getting a clear view of his opponent, his eyes widened as he gazed upon her. Before him stood a tall, Beautiful, and slender woman with long, light blue hair and blue eyes. She carried a thin silver sword, had a sinister smile plastered across her face. "So you're the one who took out my best squad?" she asked, staring Naruto up and down, seemingly inspecting him. The blonde nodded in response. "Yeah. They killed an innocent man and almost murdered his granddaughter. His actions are unforgivable." The woman smiled, readying her sword. "Hee. I like you. You seem to favor the moral high ground. But even you must know that the strong survive while the weak die," she shouted, rushing towards Naruto, suddenly launching several volleys of what appeared to be ice shards. The Uzumaki happily accepted her challenge, flaring his chakra cloak, causing the ice to melt from the intense heat. The woman's eyes widened as she met him halfway. She stabbed her sword forward, just as Naruto ducked, getting into her guard and grabbing the sword's handle. He pushed the woman to the ground and began to grapple with her in a matter of seconds, her sword flying off just as Naruto pushed her to the ground. "I don't know who you are, but it's the strong's job to protect the weak, so they can become strong," he barked. "See, call me S-Death," she growled, struggling to get out of his grip. But even she had to admit it was vice-like and that it would certainly take a lot of work to even get an inch. Whoever this guy was, he might have been even too much for her to handle, and this honestly intrigued her. "Well, S-Death, if you believe that the weak are destined to die, then you're the dumbest person I've ever met," Naruto growled, gripping her collar and picking her up. S-Death's eyes widened in shock. No one had ever countered her words before. She had always believed it was a law she must always go by. But now she had this powerful man she had just met going against it, saying it was stupid. She had never been more drawn in. Who was he? How strong was he? Where did he come from? The woman struggled against his grip, as she shot her foot up into his stomach, causing him to loosen his grip with a grunt. She quickly formed an ice dagger before launching it at Naruto, where it caught him off guard, hitting him square in the mouth. S-Death smirked, expecting his grip to loosen. Why wasn't it loosening? She asked herself. She looked back up to Naruto's only to audibly gasp. The blonde had caught the dagger in his mouth. He crushed the dagger in two with a smirk. "Like I said, S-Death," he bellowed, looking right into her eyes, mere inches from her face. "If you're strong, then it's your duty to protect the weak," he announced, his eyes meeting hers, warm ocean blue meeting cold ice. S-Death visibly blushed. She was at a loss for words for once. Here was this handsome man, appearing out of nowhere, taking out her best troops and manhandling her like it was nothing. Her heart seemed to skip a beat, as for the first time butterflies appeared in her stomach. What was happening to her? This wasn't normal. "Who are you?" she asked. Naruto put on his signature smirk. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Nice to meet you." That was it, that smile. That was the nail in the coffin. The great General S-Death had fallen in love with a man she had just met. What is this? Chapter 3. The Fateful Meeting. "Akame, Akame, Akame, wake up," an unfamiliar voice called out inside the girl's minds. She tossed and turned in her bed, the voice echoing out, again and again in her head, only getting stronger. "Come on, Akame. Come on, hang in there, come on, damn it." Finally, as if something clicked off in her head, her eyes suddenly jolted open, glowing a strong orange. She barely had a moment to think before she was mentally swept away into an unknown feeling of darkness. What going on? She called out in hysteria. The girl now known as Akame slammed against the ground, her eyes immediately opening, and she hopped up to her feet, trying to get a feel for her surroundings as she quickly realized that she was no longer safe in her room, but rather standing in the middle of a war zone. Akame slowly looked around and tried to move, only to find out that she was unable to, her feet staying in place by some unknown force. What is this? An imperial trap? A taigu? She asked herself. "Watch and listen, girl," a feminine voice called out to her, causing Akame to look all around for the source, only to find it a moment later, in the approaching figure. Not having many options, the assassin quickly got into a defensive stance just as a woman clad in all white robes walked up to her. Akame couldn't make out any of the woman's features, as the hood of the robe covered all the way down to her nose. All Akame could make out was that she had pale white skin and long flowing snow-white hair. Truly a unique character. What's going on? Who are you? Why am I here? Akame asked, the woman simply staring at her, appearing to size her up. After another moment of silence from the woman, she smiled, seemingly happy with what she saw. So you're the one. Your fate is intertwined with his now. What? Akame asked, taken back for a moment. What in the world was going on? The woman in white shook her head with a light laugh. It matters not, young one. Everything that has been set into motion now will all be explained in due time. Just know that you now hold a pivotal spot in this world's history, as one of its chosen caregivers. Watch for this as your future with my sword, she revealed, motioning towards the war zone in front of her. Snapping her finger. Instantly the world itself seemed to come alive before her own eyes. Explosions going off left and right. Body flying in the sky, followed by endless screams all around her. What the hell was this? She asked herself, just as a crimson blur crossed her field of view. Akame tracked it with her keen eyesight only to watch it land gracefully in front of her. The raven-haired assassin's eyes widening as realization struck her that this was in fact a woman. Where are you? It's time to finish this. The woman suddenly barked out into the war zone, as Akame took in all her features. Long flowing black hair that was pulled back on her left side and tied off with a white ribbon was the first thing Akame noticed on her, followed by piercing red eyes. She seemed to look like she was in her early 20s. Tall in height and a large bust for sure. She was certainly someone that caught everyone's attention on the battleground, especially with what she wore. A long, almost ceremonial kimono covered her from the neck down. It was cut down straight down the middle in two different colors. One side was black while the other was white with sakura flowers covering her upper shoulder. But the one thing that stood out most to Akame was her weapon. Brandished on her side was a flaming neon orange and black katana. The girl's eyes widened. What was this? Who was this? Akame had never seen a woman like this before, except in herself and her mother. There was no way that could be possible, there was no way that. You're right, another voice echoed from in the distance. Quickly getting closer, and catching Akame's attention away from the woman, it is time to finish this. It's time for you to face this world's new goddess. The voice yelled out, a ray of light shooting out from the shadows aimed towards the woman. Without even flinching, the woman swatted the attack to the side with her katana. The ray of light impacted the ground near her, cutting a hole deep into the earth, stunning Akame. But not kimono-wearing woman, who simply began to walk forward, approaching another figure who was walking out of the darkness surrounding the area. Look at what that power has done to you, it has turned you into something horrible. Whatever she promised you, nothing can bring him back. The same can be said for you. The ley line requires a sacrifice. He's gone. A feminine figure growled, walking out into the open, revealing herself to the extremely confused Akame and woman. A girl, slightly shorter than Akame, walked up. Long light gray hair flowed down her back as she moved. Now this one seemed extremely strange. The assassin. Much like the piercing red eyes of the other woman, this girl had melting orange eyes with strange designs surrounding her irises, followed by a unique and large ornament on the left side of her head that complemented her multiple-color outfit, which consisted of the colors gray, black, and accents of neon orange and purple. Akame watched in shock as the woman before her bit her crimson lips and gripped her katana, clearly readying for an attack. Even so, he wouldn't want me to falter. None of those I left behind would. This was our only chance. Now get out of my way. I don't want to fight you. That is where it will all end. She almost growled, pointing her sword in the direction behind the short girl. The girl, in turn, snickered in delight. Wrong. This is where you end. This is your legacy. All of your legacies. Once my mistress's plan is completed, you won't even matter. She roared, bright crimson-red embers forming around her as she lunged towards the raven-haired woman. Sprinting at full speed, pulling her fist back. The woman, in turn, readied her katana in a guard, bright orange energy materializing around her as she utters only a few words, "We'll see." The two quickly clashed, energy spewing all around the area as Akame put her hand up to try and block some of their rival forces. Her vision quickly blurring as a wave of white energy blew her out of existence. Suddenly she felt herself propelled forward at an inhuman speed. Akame tried to open her eyes, but the force of the wind was just too much, so strong. She yelped, before suddenly and painfully coming to a stop. The raven-haired girl felt herself slide across the ground before coming to a halt. "Oh ow. What's going on?" she groaned, slowly lifting her head up and opening her eyes. Only to find herself at the feet of the mysterious figure draped in all white once again. "Sorry for the sudden shift. I couldn't have you seeing too much," she giggled, just as Akame began to stand back up. Cautious about another sudden jerk, she hesitantly waits a moment to fully stand and question the woman. "You again? Who are you? Where am I? Why am I see all this?" she stammered out. The woman in white giggled once more, walking past Akame as scene began to form around them. "As I said, all in due time, child. For now, watch and listen. For this could be the one thing that saves you both. That differs from the timelines," she revealed, just as the scene came to life around the two. Akame found herself looking down at a jagged cliff riddled with smoldering remains of wagons, weapons, horses, and people. Her eyes widened as she scanned the top of the cliff, seeing both Imperial soldiers and Revolutionary Army forces amongst them. Could this have been a major battle? Could she be seeing the conclusion of the war? So many questions rattled throughout her head, but then she saw it, or her to be exact. The same raven-haired woman, only this time she wasn't taking a powerful stance of attack. No, this time she laid on her knees on the edge of the cliff. Covered in soot, dirt, and bleeding wounds. What the? Akame asked herself, while the woman in white directed her gaze to the other end of the cliff. "Watch, child," she ordered. Akame focused in, just as a portal seemed to rip straight through the air and a woman slowly stepped out. Dragging something behind her, Akame gasped at her appearance, for it was truly something out of this world. The woman in question had what looked like a high-collared hime kimono, which adorned with gold and purple lines and tomo running down the center and edges of the kimono. She looked very beautiful with shoulder-length white hair and bright red eyes. "So you are still alive?" the woman asked, walking forward, still dragging the large mass on the ground behind her. Akame looked towards the raven-haired woman who stood up on her own 2 feet. "Why yeah. Do you really think I'd simply roll over an eye?" she asked, wiping away some blood from her bottom lip. The white-haired woman giggled. "I suppose not. You were his after all. Something I can't say for the other one," she revealed, throwing the mass in front of her. Both Akame and the raven-haired woman's eyes widened in shock as they watched the body of Leonie roll across the ground, before settling face up. Her eyes still wide open, tears still noticeably pouring down her cheeks. But even Akame could tell that she was, in fact, dead, having succumbed to some horrible death. The large deep wounds that riddle her body helped reinforce this. Akame's best friend had died. Akame was still riddled with shock that she had almost missed the sudden outburst from the other woman. Leonie, what did you do?" she screamed out, rushing towards the body of the blonde, trying to shake her, but it was no use. The life had left her eyes some time ago. "It's a shame really." The white-haired woman laughed, beginning to walk forward. "She thought she could challenge me alone. Without him. Just like the rest of your comrades." What do you mean?" the raven-haired woman asked, looking up at her, angry quickly flooding her eyes, as she balled her hands into fists, beginning to stand up. To challenge the other woman. "Look around you. Do you really think I'd bring you here by chance?" she asked, spreading her arms out, at the dozens of bodies that were scattered all around them. Both Akame and the woman began to look around. Their eyes widened even further in horror. All around them laid the corpses of their comrades. Their family. Her loved ones. Night raid. And no. They both stuttered out at the same time, tears streaming down their cheeks. You could have saved them all. The white-haired woman said, laughing, as she walked up to her. Kicking Leonie's head, before suddenly and violently grabbing the raven-haired woman by the throat and lifting her up. Why didn't you do more? Huh, instead of just relying on him. She shouted, walking them both over to the edge of the cliff. Akame watched as the raven-haired woman struggled dearly for her life. Clawing at the white-haired woman's arm, this is all your own doing. Your own legacy, Akame, she roared out, lifting her into the air, as the younger girl watched in shock at the events unfolding. Naruto isn't here to save you. He's never coming back. You saw to that yourself. She growled, staring up at her, while a long blade began to form in her opposite hand, poised to strike at the older Akame. Now go join him, she uttered out, just as she stabbed her blade into her chest. The entire scene fading to white in an instant for Akame. The black-haired assassin's eyes flew open, as she realized that she was looking down, and the floor was approaching fast. Huh? Akame asked out loud, before she thumped to the ground, followed by maniacal laughter. Wake up, a voice shouted out from the door to her room. Akame would have quickly put up her guard, but the owner of the voice was someone she had known for a couple years. She looked over to see Leonie hunched over laughing to her heart's content. Come on sleepyhead, it's not like you to sleep for this long, Leonie said, trying to control herself. Leonie? Akame asked, looking surprised. She had thought that she had just witnessed Leonie die not even a few minutes ago, but then reality kicked in, and she realized that it had to be a dream of some sort. Yeah, who else would it be? Now hurry up, and get dressed. We have an assignment tonight, and mine made a whole bunch of meat for breakfast. The moment she said that, Akame's eyes lit up like a Christmas tree. Leonie laughed some more and walked out of the room. Akame looked around, trying to confirm it was a dream. Once she was sure everything was fine, she began to get up. That's when she realized she was holding something tightly in her hands. She looked down to see that Murasama was tightly in her grip, and looked to be pulsating with a strange type of white energy. Rewrite the future. A voice echoed from it, causing Akame to flinch. The voice reminding her of the woman in white from her dream. But then just as it started, the pulsating soon stopped. However, she continued to stare a few more seconds. Akame looked around some more, before she dismissed the sight for later, and began to get dressed. Say it was a dream. But it felt so real, she said, putting on her clothes, as she looked at herself in the mirror. But what was that? Who were those people? But most importantly, who is Naruto? She said as she finished getting everything ready. The girl soon exited her room and walked downstairs. She walked into the kitchen to find all of her teammates there. Mine and Shiel were in the kitchen preparing meals, while Bullet, Leonie, and Lubbock were all sitting at the table eating various foods. Yo Akame, Lubbock said, looking up and seeing her standing in the doorway. Another assignment tonight. It seems they're coming in like wildfire nowadays, Leonie said, as she tossed a sheet aside that informed them of their latest target in the capital. More corruption these days, it seems, Bullet said, sipping some coffee. Tell me about it. Yesterday I saw a group of kids being sold off to some rich pervert right on the streets, Lubbock said, leaning back in his chair and staring out the window. In broad daylight, Bullet asked, with a small amount of surprise in his eyes. Of course, he knew how bad the capital was, but nevertheless it still shocked him how people could be so cruel. Yeah, I killed him later during the day, and rescued the kids, Lubbock added in. Damn, this place is getting worse, and worse by the minute, Mine said, walking onto the room with a large plate of meat. Shiel was not far behind her, as she was bringing more food in for the others. Akame's eyes were glued onto the plate of meat. When Mine put the food down, she immediately sat down, and began to eat it quickly, but began to slow when she recalled her very vivid dream. Yeah, but that's why we're here, Leonie said, getting up from her chair. She was about to head to the door when she noticed Akame had barely eaten anything. She was beginning to get worried. Something wrong, Akame? Leonie asked, leaning beside her, causing the rest of Night Raid present in the room to turn towards her with worried faces. Huh, oh no, it's nothing. Akame said, face full of surprise when she realized that the dream was affecting her this much. Other people were beginning to notice. Really? Because you haven't really touched any of your breakfast. This isn't like you, Leonie said, pointing to the mountain of food in front of her. Yeah, you also slept in today. Are you sure you're okay? Bullet asked. Akame knew she couldn't hide it forever, so she swallowed her doubts and decided to tell them. Well, I'm not really sure, but I had this strange dream that's been bothering me. Akame said, face filling with worry. This put everyone on alert, because if Akame was worried about this, then it had to be serious. Tell us then, Mine said, sitting down next to her. Bullet, Shiel, and Lubbock all nodded in agreement. Leonie nodded her head as well. Akame took a deep breath and began to explain the very vivid dream to the rest of her team. Time skip. 5 minutes later. That's certainly strange, and you said when you woke up you were gripping Murasama tightly. Bullet asked, putting on a thinking pose, as he thought the dream over. The others were thinking it over as well, although Leonie was freaking out. She didn't want to die. Yeah, do you think it might have something to do with it? Akame asked. It could be. We still don't know everything about your Taigu. It could possibly have a dangerous side effect to it. Maybe very vivid dreams, Bullet said, closing his eyes and crossing his arms. I have an idea, Lubbock shouted out suddenly. Everyone looked over at him, raising an eyebrow. What is it, Lubbock? Mine said, sighing. The majority of the time he never had good ideas. What if the danger beast that Murasama was made from had the ability to see into the future like in some of the manga I read? Lubbock asked. Mine and Leonie just put their hands up to their faces, shaking their heads. Leonie turned towards Lubbock with an annoyed look. Lubbock, that has to be one of the... She was interrupted by Bullet, who raised his hand up to get everyone's attention. He could be right, Bullet said, eyes closed and arms crossed. Leonie and Mine shouted out in unison. There are Taigus out there with the ability to see into the future. It's quite possible that Murasama was made from a danger beast with that type of power. Bullet said. This is all too confusing for me. I don't want to deal with this. Akame, come talk to me when you finally start having interests in boys. Leonie said, getting up from her chair and beginning to walk towards the door that leads outside of their base. Where are you going? Lubbock asked. Down to the capital to collect information. What else? Leonie asked, looking confused. You mean you're going to trick some rich pervert out of his money and get drunk? Lubbock said with a smirk. We'll see where the day takes us, Leonie said, shrugging. Just remember we have that mission tonight in the high-class district. Shiel reminded her. Yeah, the family of sadists, I remember. I'll be there, Leonie said, walking out of the door. Lubbock went to take care of some chores around the base. Mine and Shiel went to collect more food and supplies in a nearby town. That left only Akame and Bullet sitting in the dining room. Bullet was busy sharpening his sword, and Akame was in deep thought. She was trying her hardest to remember the dream, but it was slowly fading from her mind. The only thing she could remember clearly was the name. Naruto. Just who is he, and how does he play into all of this? Akame muttered to herself, remembering how the woman who had fought her older self kept mentioning how there was no bringing him back and how it was Akame's fault. It was almost as if Akame and this Naruto character were connected on a much deeper level. But that was impossible. Akame would never let that happen. It would only ever end badly for both of them. But nevertheless, Akame had neglected to tell the rest of Night Raid about the boy. She wanted to keep that to herself for now. You say something, Akame? Bullet asking, looking up from sharpening his sword. Oh, nothing, just thinking, Akame said as she turned to stare out the window. The name burning into her mind. She needed to find out what was going on. She needed answers. What's your problem, lady? Naruto shouted out, as he and Esdeath both tumbled down a hillside. An almost love-struck smile plastered across the blue-haired woman's face as they both landed on level ground with a thud. Naruto quickly got his bearings as he slammed Esdeath to the ground, pushing all his weight into her. Keeping her down, well? He asked, his forearm now pressed against her throat. The woman coughed underneath his raw strength, taking a few more seconds to collect herself before she began to speak. Well, you see, and Naruto, I've never met a man like yourself. So full of strength and a strong moral compass. MHNG, she groaned out. Naruto could feel her legs moving over his back and tightening. She was preparing for a counter. The blonde used his other arm to flip her around onto her belly just as she began to speak again. I will make you mine. The Uzumaki quickly forced her arm behind her, keeping her in a hold and completely immobilizing her. Well, I'm not one for the taking, lady. Especially to a lady with such terrible views as yourself. Naruto growled, applying more pressure to her arm. Esdeath smiled, looking back up at Naruto again with the same love-struck smile. Let's just see about that. Han, she roared out, quickly coating Naruto's arm in a layer of thick ice. The blonde's eyebrows visibly rose in surprise as Esdeath smirked. Let's see you beat this. But to her amazement and shock, her ice was quickly shattered away as Naruto's fiery chakra cloak burst through it, covering his arm and healing whatever minimal damage Esdeath did to his arm. What is this? She thought to herself, watching the flame-like chakra disappear into thin air. So strong. She mentally quivered, before an additional voice brought her out of her trance-like state with this man. General Esdeath, a voice shouted out from the top of the hill. Both the woman and the man looked up only to see a vast number of soldiers standing at the top. All were looking down at them, their weapons were all at the ready. TCH typical, my army gets here right as the fun begins. Esdeath groaned internally, as she felt Naruto apply more force to her arm. Everyone defend the general, one of them suddenly shouted as they all began to run in a full sprint straight towards Naruto. The blonde didn't want to waste any more time here as it was, so thinking on his toes, he quickly rose himself and Esdeath up to their feet. Listen, lady, word of advice, maybe more people would like you if you had a better outlook on life. Besides, a person as pretty as you can't be completely bad. He smirked, quickly chopping the back of Esdeath's neck. Why you think I'm pretty? Esdeath asked, just as blackness consumed her vision and a blush covered her face, before falling unconscious onto the ground, shocking her entire army. General, they all screamed in rage a moment later, as Naruto quickly realized it was time to leave. He didn't have the time or drive to fight an entire army right. So without giving it another thought, the blonde Sunshine ND himself away from the approaching enemies, all the way back to his clone and Yukari. A few moments later, I'm here, Naruto shouted out, suddenly appearing out of thin air, causing his clone, who had been standing guard watch in the secluded clearing, to almost topple over a log in shock and terror, forcing the original Naruto to question his clone's effectiveness. Then after about half a second, his clone shot up hysterically. Come on, boss. Why'd you do that? I already have enough to deal with as it is, he shouted out. Naruto raised his eyebrow, putting his guard up and looking around. What do you mean? Is something wrong with Yukari? His clone quickly shook his head and walked up to him. Relax, boss, there's no danger. Little Yukari's fine, he announced, pointing up to a nearby tree. The original followed his gaze only to see Yukari sitting on one of the larger branches with yet another clone standing guard beside her. The two seemed to be having a pretty interesting conversation from the looks of it. Did something happen? Why's there another one? Naruto asked as he lowered his guard. His first clone nodded. Yeah, we did run into some trouble about a few minutes after we left you. Explain, Naruto said, crossing his arms. Suddenly he heard a grumble in the back of his mind from Kurama. That could only mean one thing. This was going to be a pain. Well, you see, as we moved along the trees we ended up running into this crazy girl with a katana. When Yukari and I noticed this, we also saw that she was, in fact, battling with this girl. He revealed, rolling the log from before out of the way to reveal an unconscious girl laying on the grass. The original raised an eyebrow as he took in all her features. She had long flowing blonde hair that reached down to her thighs and pale skin. All in all, she looked to be a pretty ordinary person, aside from her outfit. Naruto could only describe as one of those cowgirl outfits you'd see in a movie. Certainly not something fit for regular wear. And who exactly is this girl? Naruto asked, kneeling next to the unconscious girl, just as the other clone walked over with Yukari on his shoulders. We have no idea, but the girl with the sword was about to kill her. So naturally, we stepped in. The newly emerged clone boasted. Yukari seemed to like his antics as she began to giggle, while Naruto's first clone continued to speak. It was a pretty short battle. She seemed to be able to summon people at will somehow. But they all weren't that strong. We had just finished up with them and got situated in our positions once you showed up, boss. He explained. Then where is that girl now? Naruto asked, checking the blonde girl's pulse and breathing. She ran away. The first said, shrugging his shoulders. It's better we stayed here than risked her ambushing us or trying to go for Yukari. So what are we going to do with her, boss? The second clone asked. Naruto took a moment to think, looked over at the girl and then to Yukari. Knowing that he couldn't just leave someone here in the wilderness, I guess we'll have to take her with us. He sighed, going over to his second clone and taking Yukari off his shoulders and onto his. Maybe once she wakes up we can find where she belongs. He added, as the second clone walked over and gently picked up the unconscious girl. Yeah, hopefully, we can find out just where this imperial capital. His first clone said, quickly moving out of the clearing and into the woods. Trying to use his senses to find the nearest source civilization. Naruto watched his second clone follow close behind the first. The girl safely in his arms as they disappeared into the trees. Looks like this is all we can do for now. Naruto sighed, as he looked back at Yukari, who stared at him with her big blue eyes. Are you okay, Mr. Naruto? She stuttered out, quickly realizing he was being too gloomy and serious. Much different than his normal self, he put on a bright smile and rubbed the little girl's head. Of course. Don't gotta worry about me. I got us both, Yukari. Now, are you all settled in? She happily nodded, tightening her grip on Naruto's back. Taking this as his cue, Naruto bent his knees and took off into the trees at top speed, then hang on tight. He cheered out, disappearing into the forest, traveling to what he hoped was the imperial capital. Time skip, a few hours later. After a few hours of jumping through the trees, Naruto's group had finally arrived at their first sign of civilization. Sure, it was only a small dirt road, but at least there was still evidence that people had come through not too long ago, as shown by the fresh wagon tracks. Any movement? Naruto asked, trying to remain as quiet as possible, as the small and fragile Yukari had seemed to have fallen asleep on his back. The clone who had the only free pair of hands sat a few branches above the rest, scanning carefully. Yeah, it looks like a group of merchants, and one person following behind them at about 100 feet. He said, leaning against the trunk of the tree. Meanwhile, the second clone was sitting calmly next to Naruto, still tightly holding onto the unconscious girl. All in all, their little group was doing okay. But something felt off. The blonde could feel it. Naruto peered over to the road, just as the small wagon rolled down the road. Both men seemed to be laughing and joking. In high spirits, it seemed, but all of a sudden the ground began to shake violently, and everyone was put on alert. An earthquake? The clone beside him asked. Naruto shook his head, gently putting Yukari down on the branch. No, I don't think. Craasssh. The blonde was immediately interrupted by a large crash on the roadside. He and his clones all darted their heads over to the source of the noise. Just in time to see a weird-looking creature erupt from beneath the road and stare down at the wagon. Earth Dragon. The men in the wagon shouted as they both dived off the wagon just as the beast smashed it into pieces. Both of them quickly stumbled to their feet and began to run away in the opposite direction. Naruto clenched his teeth, quickly looking up at his clone above. Damn it. We have to help them. You stay here with Yukari. The clone nodded, jumping back down to them. Understood, boss. The original looked over to the clone carrying the girl and began to bark more orders. You put the girl down, and we'll go help them. The other clone nodded and put the girl down next to the now drowsy Yukari. Then they both jumped down from the tree and sprinted out into the road. The Earth Dragon in their sights. Let's end this with one hit. Naruto shouted out, as he started to focus chakra into his right hand. Yeah, his clone said, focusing chakra into his own hand. Within milliseconds large glowing yellow orbs appeared in their hands. The two picked up speed and rushed towards the Earth Dragon. Both pushed off the ground in sync, resang. But Naruto never got the chance to unleash the attack as the Earth Dragon suddenly and violently fell over on the ground. Dead. Both of them landed on the ground with puzzled expressions. What the hell? His clone asked, looking around. All right. A voice cheered out, just as a figure landed on top of the monster's corpse. Naruto quickly sized him up, taking in all his features. The boy seemed to be a few years younger than him. He had green eyes and medium-length brown hair with a noticeable cowlick. The boy wore a tan sweater vest, a pair of black pants and combat boots. In his hands, he carried what seemed to be a simple combat sword. That was an amazing boy, shouted a voice as the two men who were sent running in fear from the beast had come back, congratulating him, all while Naruto quickly dispelled his clone, simply standing behind the boy, waiting for a moment to speak. You were actually able to defeat an Earth Dragon single-handedly, one of them said, shaking the boy's hand. Well, obviously for someone like me that was a piece of cake. The boy shouted, clearly boasting about the kill, causing both the men to look at him with confused expressions. What's your name? The other one asked with a smile, trying to shake the awkwardness away. The boy smiled once more. I'm Tatsumi. And you better remember the name. I'm gonna make it big in the capital. He shouted out, pointing to himself. The two men's expression immediately changed from relief to worry, as he brought up the imperial capital. So you want to become successful in the capital too? The other man asked Tatsumi. Yeah, it's every country boy's dream to make it big there, he said with a bright smile. The two men just looked away with a worried expression. What's up? Tatsumi asked, clearly noticing their worried faces. The first spoke up with audible worry in his voice. The capital's not some fantasy land where you'll find all of your wildest dreams, and be served food on a silver platter. There are worse monsters than danger beasts that lurk in those streets and houses. He explained. Are you saying there's something worse than danger beasts out there? Tatsumi shouted out, being a complete airhead to what they were going on about. Yeah, people, their hearts are filled with darkness and hatred. Makes this thing here look like an angry raccoon. The second one said, looking away, kicking the corpse of the monster. Then it sounds like the imperial capital needs someone like me, a voice said from behind Tatsumi, who in turn quickly spun around, coming face to face with Naruto. Huh? Tatsumi asked, raising an eyebrow as the blonde walked up to them. Who are you? One of the men asked. I'm Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. You're going to the capital too? The blonde asked, staring down at Tatsumi, with a smirk. Yeah, Tatsumi asked, backing away awkwardly from the blonde. Naruto placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. Want to travel together? He asked suddenly, causing Tatsumi's face to fill with shock. But little did he know that Naruto had a master plan in all this now. What that he came up with on the fly. He needed someone to carry the cowgirl. Sure, he could use his clone, but that was such a bore. But also there was another reason. A far more important one. The boy reminded him of his younger self. His brash and overconfident demeanor. His cheerful and delightful expression. Something of his that was put on the back burner during the war. The blonde couldn't help but feel that this boy was going to go places, and he might help bring some normalcy back into his life. Sure, Tatsumi said, barely giving it much thought. The blonde smirked playfully. Great, let's go. He cheered, his plan coming together as he ran back into the woods to get the others. Tatsumi was about to follow but was quickly stopped by one of the men from the wagon. What is it? Tatsumi asked, looking back. I don't know what it is about that guy kid, but if you want my advice, keep an eye on him. It seems super suspicious, but not bad intentioned, he said, beginning to fumble in his pocket for something. Also, we want you to have this. He handed the boy a large bag of coins. For what? Tatsumi asked, raising his eyebrows. For saving us. You earned it. The man smiled. The other man behind him nodded in agreement. But be safe out there, kid. We got to get what's left of this stuff over to the next village. He waved, as both of them quickly walked around the monster, to the wreckage of their wagon. Tatsumi quickly peered into the bag only for his eyes to widen in shock from the amount of coin inside. Whoa. Now with this, I'm sure to find a decent place to stay tonight, and then I can send the rest of this back to my village. He smiled, turning around to see Naruto standing with what looked like an exact copy of himself. This caused Tatsumi's eyes to widen in shock. Was he seeing double? Combat figure? Surely not. The copy had an unconscious woman on his back that looked like something he'd see from one of his folktales, and on Naruto's back, there was a small girl staring over at Tatsumi with big blue eyes. Naruto right? Tatsumi asked, looking over to him, rubbing his neck awkwardly. Yeah, the blonde asked. The little girl on his back put her chin on the top of Naruto's head and stared down at Tatsumi. Who's that? He asked, pointing at the copy. Who in turn grinned back. Oh yeah, that's my clone, Naruto said, pointing over to him. This caused Tatsumi's eyes nearly pop out of his head. Clone, he shouted out. This guy can make copies of himself. Tatsumi thought to himself. It's a long story, I can explain it to you on the way, Naruto said, waving the thought away. But could you carry that girl? He added. What? Why me? Tatsumi shouted out. Because my clone needs a break, Naruto said with a smirk. But both Naruto and his clone knew they could go on for another 20 days without needing to rest. Super suspicious. The merchants. Words echoed in his mind. Sure, this didn't look messed up at all. But he also trusted the merchant's other words that it didn't seem like he had bad intentions, so Tatsumi went along with it. Fine. Give her here, he said, bending down. The clone, who was now currently holding the unconscious girl bridal style, placed her on Tatsumi's back gently. Tatsumi had no trouble holding the women. Thanks. You're dismissed now, the Uzumaki said, looking back to his clone. All right. See ya, boss, the clone said, quickly disappearing in a cloud of smoke. Tatsumi's eyes just widened in shock even more, but then he felt someone's eyes on his back. He quickly turned to see the small girl on Naruto's back staring down at him from the shoulders of the blonde. But once they made eye contact with each other, she quickly hid her face in embarrassment. Naruto, who's that? Tatsumi asked, pointing up to the little girl. Naruto raised an eyebrow as he pointed up to her. This little one. This is Yukari, Naruto said, patting the little girl's head. I'm kind of taking care of her for the time being. Hello, she stuttered out, without looking over at Tatsumi. She's a bit shy, Naruto whispered out, causing her to bury her face, even more, into Naruto's hair. Well, it's very nice to meet you, Tatsumi said with a bright smile that almost rivaled Naruto's. Even though the little girl didn't even look up to see it. Come on, we only have a short walk to the capital, Tatsumi added, turning away from them and moving out. You're the guide, Naruto said, adjusting Yukari's position on his shoulders, as he followed Tatsumi down the road. Say, why are you going to the capital? Naruto asked as they walked down the road together. Well, Tatsumi began with a smirk. Thank you,